This may be a shocking and controversial review of this video.
When you're talking about Israel, you're touching the apple of God's eye. And a lot of this book can be linked back to October 7th.
Yeah.
And that Hamas massacre of 1,200 Israelis. Tell us about the tie in this book to the October 7th massacre and the war between Israel and Hamas.
Yeah, well, the first thing is that literally I was sharing my congregation, Beth Israel, one of the mysteries of this. And the mystery ordained that there would be an attack on Israel. It would happen in 2023.
He says Israel is the apple of God's eye. But who is Israel? Galatians 3:29 says, if you are Christ's, then you are Abraham's seed. That makes Christians Israel. Christians became the new Israel after the ancient Jews persistently rejected their own Messiah, Jesus. Jesus himself said to the ancient Jews who rejected him, your father is the devil. Now that doesn't mean Jews can't be saved. Salvation has always been available to all of humankind. God simply took the mission of the gospel away from Israel and gave it to the Christians. When we misunderstand who Israel is, it removes our focus from the mission of the Christian church to spread the gospel to the whole world, and it puts our focus on literal Israel and literal battles in the Middle East. Jesus himself says, my kingdom is not of this world. Now you may be offended with this next point, but please be patient and listen. Many Christians believe that there are two ways to be saved. There's through Christianity, the Christian gospel, and then there's ancient Israel. But there really is only one way to be saved. It has always been the same in the New Testament and the Old Testament. Abraham believed, and it was accounted him for righteousness. What kind of language is that? The word believe is the same as faith. Abraham was saved by grace through faith, the same way we're saved. Everyone in the Old Testament was saved the same way as everyone in the New Testament, that is, by grace through faith. The only difference is that the Old Testament characters looked forward to the Messiah, and we look backwards to the Messiah. People in the ancient days, they were never saved by doing the ceremonies. They did the ceremonies because those ceremonies pointed forward to the Messiah who would come and save them from their sins. Now, what I'm about to say will be eye-opening. The sanctuary service in the Old Testament was a drama to teach the Israelites the plan of salvation, the same plan that we Christians in the New Testament believe in. You see, most people back then, they couldn't read and write the way we can. So they had to have the plan of salvation acted out. Please also check out Doug Bachelor's presentation and booklet on this topic.
This is a spiritual thing that we're all involved in. Yeah. And if anything, not only does Jewish existence show the existence of God, its testimony, but it also testifies to the existence of the enemy. So you've got this war, and then in Revelation, you have this vision of this dragon who makes war against this woman who has a crown of 12 stars, who gives birth to Messiah. That's Israel.
Now, he says this is a spiritual war. Yes, that's correct. That's why we can't be focusing on a literal national Israel and a literal war in the Middle East. The true war is for our hearts and minds. Are we going to do things using Satan's method of force or God's method of freedom? He says that the woman represents Israel. It actually represents all of God's people for all time. In the Old Testament, it represented Israel. In the New Testament, it represents Christianity. Israel stopped being God's chosen people when they crucified Christ, later stoned Stephen, and persistently rejected the Christian message. God gave them all the way up to 70 AD to change their mind. I like how this book puts it. For nearly 40 years after the doom of Jerusalem had been pronounced by Christ himself, the Lord delayed his judgments upon the city and the nation. Wonderful was the long suffering of God toward the rejectors of his gospel and the murderers of his Son. There were still many among the Jews who were ignorant of the character and the work of Christ, and the children had not enjoyed the opportunities or received the light which their parents had spurned. Through the preaching of the apostles and their associates, God would cause light to shine upon them. The long-suffering of God toward Jerusalem only confirmed the Jews in their stubborn impenitence. In their hatred and cruelty toward the disciples of Jesus, they rejected the last offer of mercy. Then God withdrew his protection from them and removed his restraining power from Satan and his angels, and the nation was left to the control of the leaders she had chosen. The whole Bible, the entire gospel, has always been about the transformation of our characters. Let me give you a biblical example. Do you remember when David slew Goliath? Goliath was an external problem, but David trusted in God and David overcame. Do you remember when David had to run for his life for 12 years from Saul? Saul was an external problem. You see, David had learned to trust God with these external problems. But then do you remember the problem he had with Bathsheba and Uriah? He lusted after Bathsheba, slept with her, killed Uriah eventually, and when Nathan the prophet rebuked him, David realized that his biggest enemy, his biggest problem, was the enemy in his own heart, his own selfishness and greed and lust. That is the true problem that all of us have. This is not an external battle. The battle is against our selfish, sinful natures, and we need to overcome that. And do you remember what David said? He said, "Create in me a clean heart, O God." When he realized the true battle, the real battle, is internal, then he cried out to God for God to give him a clean heart and a right spirit. And that's what God gave him. And that was his true, complete conversion. It's about the removal of sin from our characters and the imputation of Christ's righteousness so that we can live a happy, holy, healthy life and get ready for when Jesus comes. You might want to check out this next video on the greatest deception that humanity has ever faced. Most people have never heard this before. I hope this was helpful to you. Please like and follow, and I will see you soon.